what I'm going to tell you guys today, I'm going to be a little bit fanciful because I can, and tell you a bit of a love story about science and the media and how this relationship has blossomed over time and to where we are today. So you can kind of, spoiler alert, it's complicated. So, stages of relationship. Yes, I am taking this as literally as possible. This relationship begins with a honeymoon, right? That beautiful, sweet stage where everything is wonderful and lovely. And then you fall into accommodation where it's like, okay, well, you know, maybe he snores. But okay, I can live with that because there's all these other fantastic things. And then there's a challenge, and this is kind of the point where you come to the crossroads where you say, is it worth it to stay in this relationship? And if you are going to continue in the relationship, then there's the rebirth phase. So in the beginning, as all good stories tell us, scientific journalism began actually with H.G. Wells, who you're probably all way more familiar with for his sci-fi stories. But he actually wrote this in 1894. There is not only danger of scientific grants being cut off, but of their being misapplied by a public whose scientific education is neglected. So as you can see, the more things change, the more they stay the same. So in this article that was published in Nature, which is still around today, I'm sure, as you all know, he was advocating the popularization of science. And so he kind of started a revolution where the honeymoon happened, and science and media got together, and it was beautiful. There were fireworks and doves, and even big newspapers like the New York Times started hiring on full-time science editors to run entire science sections. And they encouraged accessible stories, they encouraged things that people would be interested in, and it started this gee whiz phenomenon where, wow, this is really cool, and you know, you can see men of science more or less agog over the results of eclipse observations, like the moon it went dark, you know, like so you can see like this is sort of the kind of sensationalism.
Were scientists still baffled back then?
Scientists are always baffled. I can say that because I am one. So yes, nobody need worry. You can notice at the bottom. They're not where they seemed to be or where they were calculated to be, but nobody worried because it was wonderful and science is fantastic. And so a lot of the literature you'll see of the time, you see a lot of this utopian future where science will solve the world's problems and we won't have hunger and we won't have poverty and gee whiz, won't that be a great time, Pop? And well, then something happened. This is an extremely famous quote, and this is pictures of the bomb that was dropped in, well, both Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And sort of it came to the front that science can be evil. Science is not going to save us all because science could destroy us all at the same time. And on top of, you know, the memory of that, the horror in Japan, you know, in the middle of last century, we had this Cold War, which loomed well into the 80s. And so this was this constant reminder that science is the cause for all this fear that we could be obliterated because, you know, we tried to learn something. And so the public, as it was getting this focus from the media, journalism shifted to, well, you know, is science as good as we say it is? You know, is there only the good side? And so it turned into not necessarily a bad thing, where they were giving more balanced reporting and saying, well, okay, you know, you shouldn't just say, gosh darn it, we're going to go to space and it'll be fantastic. You know, there was a more balanced approach of, okay, well, and these are the downsides, these are the costs, and that sort of thing. However, the problem with this approach is that they had these people who were pure science journalists, and that's all they did was science. They trained as scientists, and then they did writing. And so this led into a lot of misinformation because they were presenting what the scientists were hearing. And a lot of things that scientists say can be confusing and scary and sometimes just weird. So, you know, this was a good compromise from the honeymoon stage because we were trying to be a little bit more accurate about what we were saying to the public in the media. But at the same time, it kind of led to this, the challenge. And so historically, science fiction has kind of represented the problems with science and sort of told cautionary tales as old as you know, Frankenstein with the creation of Frankenstein's monster and a lot of H.G. Wells' work. And what this sort of led to, and it kind of culminated in more recent times, I guess our age, I could say, is all these super hyped promises of journalism, especially in the early part of the last century. They never came to fruition. And it was sort of like, well, what has science done for us lately? Where is my hoverboard? So what it's shifted from is, science has failed us. We're not living like the Jetsons. What's the deal? And it's turned from this, well, there must be hoverboards and the government and science is keeping them from us. And so the press has kind of taken that angle to be new and interesting. And you know what? Sometimes it's been justified. I'm not going to tell you that science is all good and only good things have been done in the name of science. Those of you who don't know what the Tuskegee syphilis study was, it's a way more complicated issue than I can get to in the next 15 minutes. But basically, it was where they had people who were black and impoverished, and they were giving them fake treatment for their syphilis, and they all died horrible, horrible deaths. So, and I believe in a lot of the cases they actually infected them with syphilis. So, it's just, science has committed a lot of atrocities and does need to be held responsible for it. So I'm not saying that we shouldn't have watchdogs, not at all. But science is, the problems with presenting this exclusively in media has led to this current situation of a lot of fear-mongering. And so right now, let's say we're at the crossroads here, and so we get the hoverboard issues. This was, okay, well, you can see I kind of obsessively, compulsively checked Google News because I caught this 19 minutes after it was published. But this is just a feed off of Google News on the exact same study. So the first one coming out of Seattle, thorough studies won't put vaccine worries to rest. And on the other end of the spectrum, vaccine cleared again as autism culprit. And the other two are somewhere in the middle. And reading these headlines, you would never know that this is talking about the same study that found that vaccines were mostly safe, mostly effective, and had some rare side effects. And this one is from last Saturday, and I kind of wanted to die when I was reading it. Chronic Lyme disease, for those of you who don't know, is not a thing. Lyme disease is a bacteria that infects you. You have some really nasty symptoms for a couple of weeks, and it can be lethal. And you take your antibiotics, and you clear it from your system, and then you go on with your life, hopefully. But in a percentage of the people who are infected with Lyme disease, they develop these chronic, persistent symptoms, and it's a very big deal. Like, these people's lives are massively compromised. And so this article decided to, this author decided to do an article on them. So awesome. The article consisted of, I believe I counted 24 paragraphs talking about a person who has or who previously had Lyme disease, and her experiences and her story. And then they got into what Lyme disease was and what actual people who knew anything about Lyme disease had to say those 26 paragraphs down. They talked to them for 3 paragraphs, and they went on for another 20 about how horrible doctors are, because what there's certain groups of people who, based on absolutely zero evidence, in fact against the evidence, want to give 6 months of antibiotics to these people. And antibiotics are not without side effects, and they can cause lots of serious long-term issues. And chronic Lyme disease, or not chronic Lyme disease, but Lyme disease symptoms that persist are actually an autoimmune. Your body starts attacking itself because this pathogen has kind of initiated it. So that is the story. And instead, this foremost infectious disease Dr. Ronald, said he submitted them to a blood sample to test for Lyme disease, and not a single one of these patients that had experienced these chronic symptoms tested positive. So there was no DNA, there was no RNA of this bacteria in this person's system. And okay, so they don't have an infection. That by definition, if you have a chronic infection, the bacteria has to be there. Otherwise, it's not an infection. And that's not the conclusion they came to with his section. With his section, they concluded, he noted that 2 of his patients have claimed incredible results from taking antibiotics. And then they go on to say why you should have 6 months of antibiotics if you think you have chronic Lyme disease, and that there were doctors in Manitoba that were willing to provide this. So this is the sort of thing where, you know what, let's break up. I can't deal with this anymore. You're not listening. I don't feel like you're valuing me as a person in this relationship. And frankly, I'm sick of your snoring. Well, what it comes down to is if knowledge can create problems, as we know it can, it's not through ignorance that we can solve them. We need to find a way to come to the rebirth stage. As H.G. Wells pointed out, science needs public support. Good science is funded publicly and available for all, and is for the benefit of all. And if we have people telling us that we're actually just trying to give their babies autism, we're not going to be able to synthesize those goals. Similarly, the media is trying to make money. They're trying to make a cool story, and you know what? There are a lot of cool stories out there that just aren't getting the press. For example, the polio rate in India is presently 0. For the past 8 months, it has been 0. It has been eradicated from India at this time due to an extensive vaccine. Isn't that awesome? Why have you not heard about that yet? I'm sorry, I get so excited about these things because to think that polio could be eradicated not just from North America, not just from Europe, but the entire world within our lifetimes, that is cool. So, sorry, little pulpit there. So, what it comes down to is to get the public interested in science and to get the media money and to get the scientific community money so they can do the work to help the public, everybody needs to have a base knowledge of scientific education, and that's everyone's responsibility. I'm not going to say it's science's fault for not educating people. I'm not going to say it's the media's fault for not educating people. I'm not saying it's people's fault for not educating themselves. The point is we have a complex situation here, and yes, we're not in the honeymoon phase anymore. That's long and gone. We know we're not going to have flying cars and hoverboards anytime soon. But we have this need for a strong, mutually beneficial relationship. And so I want to conclude with kind of helping you guys out for how we can have a good relationship with the media. And I think this is a good follow-up to some of the other talks we've had today. So, when you're reading scientific journalism, beware of the maze. The maze, the coulds, the mights, the woulds, the shoulds. This is, Science Daily is a feed of really typically high-level science stuff. I don't read the majority of it because it makes no sense to me. But I skim the headlines and kind of keep an eye on things that are interesting, and this was all my feed said one day. So every single one of them was a maybe, could, should. So there's a huge difference in potential future applications and current data. So, you know, there's a potential that common blood disorders could be a risk for fractures. Okay, that's interesting. Antioxidants may prevent alcohol-induced liver disease. But it doesn't really say anything whether it does. It's usually, if we're using this kind of language, it means it's not confirmed. We have early indications of that, and we're not jumping to conclusions. But one of the problems with presenting stuff to the media is that you want to make it as broadly applicable as possible so people can understand why the heck we're funding it. No one cares about pernicious anemia, but maybe they care if their kid's going to break a bone. So for you guys, keep aware of those words. The other thing is abstracts are freely available. If you just search Google Scholar with like the name of the abstract and the name of the author, you should be able to find it pretty easily. And just skim through it. Like, don't expect to understand it all, but usually the first sentence and the last sentence will tell you at least what the authors say about it. And you'd be surprised how many times you read the newspaper about a study and get the idea from that, and you go to the actual paper and the author's conclusions are completely different. Second opinions, researchblogging.org is fantastic. You can get tons of different opinions. It's all editorials in the blog form, but it's from people who are knowledgeable in the area. And so you get all these expert opinions coming together, and that's going to help you interpret it. I wouldn't take any one at face value, but at least you can get an idea of what someone who actually knows the subject matter is saying about it. Also important to remember, preliminary research is preliminary, and I tried to find a lolcat for this and I couldn't. So, okay, you've decided to be super ambitious, you're really interested in this study on chronic Lyme disease, and you want to know a little bit more about it, so you've found the abstract. And the abstract will contain, well, it won't contain post hoc fallacy, I should hope, but it will contain the methods and the sample sizes. So if you have they say preliminary, or, research study shows that HIV does not cause AIDS. And you're a little like, okay, that doesn't sound right. Look at the method they're using. I mean, some things, even to a layperson, should immediately jump out. If they're looking at this in mice, well, it's not going to get HIV, so of course it doesn't make sense, right? And so that's one way you can quickly see that, okay, this is not a conclusion we should be drawing. Similarly, if you see a clinical trial that says that yoga, meditation cures cancer, if it cured cancer in 3 people that they studied, then the odds of that being a real problem or a real solution are pretty low. If they found that in 1,500 people, now you should be thinking, okay, this is probably a lot more legitimate. And of course, beware the post hoc fallacy, which we already know quite well from Paul's talk. And beware of the reporting bias. Early studies are typically reported when they're positive, because no one cares about a piddly little study that somebody did on 10 people, unless you're Andrew Wakefield and you're reporting about vaccines. And nobody, like, people will talk about it, but at the end of the day, like, it's just a preliminary study. It needs to be followed up with something bigger. The problem is those bigger studies, unless they're positive, people don't report them. So the positive studies get attention, the negative ones don't. So that's why you hear from time to time in the news, like, they've proved ESP. No, they haven't. You just don't hear about the follow-up studies where they've said, no, this is why they're wrong and their methodology is flawed, and don't worry about it, they're just a paranormal researcher. And finally, I hope I've portrayed this. Please get excited. That we are doing some awesome things right now. There is so much stuff on the horizon that has so much potential to benefit all of us, and even in ways that we can't possibly comprehend. So cautious optimism is healthy. I mean, still be skeptical. I mean, that's why we're all here, right? But read it and go, you know what, that's cool. I really hope that comes to fruition, and that we can have that in the future. And it's also important to gain some perspective on things. So think about where we are now compared to where we were 100 years ago. All the magical technologies we have. I mean, we have iPads. Awesome. So just some references and further reading, and I'll take any questions.
I just saw yesterday on Google Plus that XKCD guy pointed out, Randall Monroe pointed out, nuclear fission was invented closer to the invention of barbed wire than it was to today. That's science. That's science progress.
Yeah.
Think about it.
Barbed wire wasn't invented until pretty recent, though.
Yeah.
Well, but still, it's one of those like old timey farm things that you think of, right?
Nuclear
And
fission is 100 and some years old already.
yeah.
Those are mine.
Electric cars too.
Yeah.
Nuclear fission was invented for television.
Yeah. So, if no one has any questions... Oh, okay.
It's not much of a question, but it's more of a statement.
Mm-hmm.
You didn't mention... I don't remember you mentioning about the abuse of statistics.
Oh. If you want to learn about abusive statistics, read Bad Science. He goes into it extensively. And I thought about it, and I had some notes on it, and I just decided, no, I'm not even touching it, because there's so many ways that people can manipulate the data. Just as much as you're skeptical of, for say, a chiropractor telling you that they can cure autism, you should be skeptical of a new drug from a pharmaceutical company, because until it's been independently evaluated against appropriate controls, the current standard of care, then let's not freak out about it quite yet.
Even if everything is totally 100% on the up and up, they can present it as, this can double your chance of catching this.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
And if the chance was only 1% to begin with, now it's 2%.
Yeah, real numbers as opposed to, like 1 in 100 people die in car accidents. Oh, well, if you drink and drive, you'll increase it 4,000-fold. And it's like, oh, okay, no, it's actually, 1 in 400,000. Okay, so, yeah.
Don't drink and drive.
Oh, yes, don't drink and drive. It's still a really bad idea, but, it's the scare tactics thing, right? So.
I have a question.
Yeah.
How do I get a Google Plus it?
Ask someone who has one to find you.
So I was looking.
Yeah.
I'll just give you your email.
So
As far as, we're looking at this issue of science and media, and I think the issue that we have to remember now is that science and media are not monoliths.
No, of course not.
When people, you quote articles about the relevant skeptics back then, you have to remember, why was the media excited about science back then, or why do we have this perception of the media not being as excited about science now? So if you want to go back then, when industry and science are in line, people make money. When industry and science fall out of line, industry wants to stop, or it's going to see the media with negative, they just want to both sides of the story. The media also has a bias towards reporting both sides of the story. As a journalist, you're trained to have both sides, and science is only one side of things. There's truth, and there's everything else.
Yeah.
Only the truth counts in science. And the media is not papers anymore. Anyone with a computer and an idea is now the media. So anyone can put...
I have an awesome book that I just got downstairs. This is media too, right? So...
if you want to look at something like, you mentioned the autism vaccine thing. If this was taking place in the 1970s, you would not be hearing about anti-vaxxers. I'm not saying they wouldn't exist, but you'd be in small, isolated pockets unaware of each other's existence. When you have the internet, now you have the movement. And that's why this has persisted, despite it obviously being industry's interest for people producing vaccines. So I think it just goes with that you have to have a little more understanding of why it is science and the media, as you're saying, don't appear to be getting along right now.
Right, and of course, it could be said for pretty much anything that science is related to. It's more complicated than this. Anything that I'm saying is in a 15-minute presentation is going to be more complicated. And if I had an hour, if I had a day, it would still be more complicated. And that's not just true for this discussion, but for pretty much any concept. The world is fabulously complex. So, yeah.
I don't think this really is a comment on your overall presentation, but more about the last question or comment, because I actually think I heard somewhere that vaccines weren't really among the most profitable things pharmaceutical companies do, that they're pretty low on the list of profitable activities.
I don't think the ranking of profitability matters so much as just the capacity to generate profit. You don't hear a lot about they call them orphan drugs, which are the ones that cost astronomical amounts of money because they cost so much to develop, and there's 20 people on the planet that even can take it. So, I mean, you're not going to hear a lot about that in the media because nobody cares because there's only a few people. Yeah, I know you laugh, but ultimately that's what it comes down to. If people report on something that doesn't affect anybody else, then it's not going to get any attention. And similarly, if the company's not going to make any money off of it, then why do they even really care? So, I mean, even if vaccines aren't the most profitable thing, they certainly are profitable, right? So, yeah.
I was just down at the amazing meeting down in Las Vegas with James Randi. I just wanted to say, you're as good a speaker as anything I saw down there.
Thanks.
Still got time.
Oh, okay. Well, okay.
Be on time again. We can get back on track.
Do you want to get back on track?
Behind time, but,
I mean, if anybody wants to discuss anything they've seen in the media lately, too, that really made you upset.
Contagion movie, was it that decent?
Yes, actually. Okay, I am not endorsed in any way by the makers of this movie, but I saw Contagion 2 nights ago, and it was actually pretty solidly based in science. I don't know if anyone in the room has seen it.
As compared to Planet of the Apes?
Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah. So yeah, Rise of the Planet of the Apes, it made me angry as someone who's previously been involved in animal research. I'm a very pro-animal person, so that was very difficult for me. And then to see research vilified like that made me really upset because it would never happen that way. I mean, okay, in public research, the animals are treated extraordinarily well to the best of our capacity, and we're not allowed to just be like, oh, well, we don't like it anymore, so throw it out and kill it. Like, that just... Okay, wouldn't happen. Whereas Contagion was, it's a really complicated movie because there's so many people involved, but it really gives you a good sense of how many people it takes. So,
Did it have zombies eating people?
I wish, no.
Jude Law is the campaigner.
Yes. Oh, and you guys would love Jude Law's. Yes. Oh, he plays a guy selling homeopathic remedy for this like horribly noxious killer disease. I'm not going to spoil it for anybody. No spoilers.
Even though spoilers improve our enjoyment.
Exactly.
I saw that article too.
Tell us it'll be
There's no way.
30C.
Yes. Actually, I was thinking 200C. So, sorry, you want to say?
I haven't seen Contagion yet, but I saw an article in Slate Magazine where the headline read, Contagion makes epidemiologists appear sexy. So I'm hoping that
Yeah, no, it was definitely an awesome movie. I enjoyed it. So, but okay, I'm gonna let you guys take a break. I'm being by proxy MC now, so thank you.